Hello. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to get to talk to you about the role of meaningful relationships in preparing youth for permanency. So, we're going to give everybody just a few minutes to come into the space. And in the meantime, if you'd like to share your role and your location in the chat so we can get to know who's here, that will be wonderful. Oh,
There's
there we
some,
go.
yeah, there's some coming in now, Beth. I see Texas. Oh, they're
Ohio,
flying. Oklahoma, Nebraska.
Illinois, Michigan,
I see
Albuquerque. I think I saw
Ohio.
someone say.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Wonderful. We're so excited. Thank you all for joining us. Anyone who just logged on, you might notice we're just popping locations and roles into the chat so we can all get to know each other a little bit. New York, yay. Maryland. I used to live in Maryland.
I saw an Idaho. I don't think we said that one yet.
Oh, great.
Canada.
Yay. Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome. South Dakota. Another Canada, Nova Scotia. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Pennsylvania.
Columbus, Ohio. That's where we are.
We have a Puerto Rico as well.
Oh, yay.
Welcome.
One of our Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters from Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
The names are flying by, but it's nice to see some familiar names, familiar, I almost said faces, but just names.
Familiar places.
Florida. Yes, that's good. Welcome, welcome. Utah, exclamation point. I love that. Welcome, Holly. Wonderful. And lots of different roles too. Some folks,
Mhm.
like we said, from Wendy's Wonderful Kids, but I'm seeing CASA volunteers, a Pride trainer, folks who work in foster care and other aspects of adoption. So
Mhm.
looks like we have a very great crowd. Anybody who's just coming in, feel free to pop your location and your role into the chat. We're just kind of getting started and giving some space and time for folks to come in before we get started. Welcome. All right. Well, it looks like folks are still joining us, but we are going to go ahead and get started. So, thank you all for sharing. All right. Sorry, I keep getting distracted by the chat. So many people saying where they're from. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us and for sharing a little about yourselves. We're hopeful to get to chat with you again soon. It's now my honor to introduce Rita Sorinen, President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption.
Great. Hello, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. I'm Rita Sornin, President and CEO of the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, and I just want to welcome you to today's webinar on the topic of preparing youth for permanency through meaningful relationships. And to each of you with us today, thank you. We know there are a lot of places you could be, but we're honored that you have chosen to join us for this important conversation. Last I looked at the numbers, it was over 600. It's such an important conversation. As we talk about this journey to achieving permanency for children in foster care, it's important to recognize the unique needs of these young people who have experienced significant trauma in their lives. So in this webinar, Danielle and Beth, expert trainers from the foundation, will discuss the importance of engaging a network of supportive adults as a critical aspect of permanency preparation. You'll learn about individualized, trauma-informed strategies and how they can help to build trust, strengthen resilience, and prepare youth to thrive in a permanent family. The foundation is dedicated to partnering with child welfare professionals and advocates just like you to find safe, permanent homes for children waiting in foster care. So simply thank you for all that you do. And now I will just turn it back to Danielle and Beth.
Thank you so much, Rita, for your leadership and dedication to youth and care. As Rita said, my name is Beth Stahl. I'm a training associate director at the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. And I've been at the foundation for about 3.5 years, and I've worked in adoption and child welfare for a total of 15 years, including time as a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter and supervisor.
And hi, I'm Danielle DiMatteo. I'm also a training associate director here at the foundation, and I've been here for about 2.5 years. And I've worked in the field of child welfare for a total of about 16 years, mostly in the ongoing field as both a caseworker and a supervisor. So welcome, everyone.
Before we get started, I just want to share a few reminders and housekeeping tips from our session today. This session is being recorded so that we can share it later. We ask that if you have questions, you please use the Q&A function to ask any questions that you might have. And just keep in mind that we are already up to 700 participants today. So we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as we can, but just know that we might not be able to get to all of them. We really do value your feedback, and we ask that you complete the survey that's going to pop up at the end of today's webinar. Participants who are attending the live session will receive a certificate of completion, and that's going to be emailed to you within 1 week. Certificates are not available for those viewing the recording later. This program is also approved by the National Association of Social Workers for 1 continuing education contact hour for live attendees only. So it will not be offered for the recorded version. In order to receive that CE credit, we ask that you do complete the survey and make sure to include your license number. That survey is required for us in order to issue you CE certificate for attending today. CE certificates will be issued within 30 days after the evaluations are reviewed. So with that, I think, Danielle, we're ready to get started with our learning objectives.
Yes, thank you, Beth. Today, our learning objectives for you are that you understand the importance of early permanency preparation for youth, that you're able to identify strategies to tailor permanency preparation specific to each youth, and how to incorporate trauma-informed practices into permanency preparation. And then finally, how to engage supportive adults in the process as well. At the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, our mission is to dramatically increase the number of adoptions of children waiting in North America's foster care system. We will talk more about this later, but while you see the word adoption in our mission, we want to be clear that the foundation supports legal permanency in all forms, and professionals working in our signature Wendy's Wonderful Kids program are trained to explore all legal permanency options with the youth they serve. Our vision is that every child will find a permanent home and a loving family. And we believe that permanency is possible for every child and young person. Across the United States and Canada, there are over 390,000 children and young people currently in foster care, and more than 130,000 of them are waiting for legal permanency. Sadly, though, year after year, over 20,000 young people age out of care without a family. The first 2 numbers are certainly unsettling, but this last number is the one that keeps us up at night. The youth most likely to be heading in this direction are the ones our Wendy's Wonderful Kids program is focused on, and those are the youth we will be focusing on today. You're also likely all too familiar with the statistics you see on the screen. Young people who age out of foster care face a myriad of challenges. 1 in 5 youth will be homeless after age 18. Only 50% will be employed at age 24, and less than 3% will earn a college degree. And 70% of former female foster youth will be pregnant by the age of 21. And 1 in 4 youth will experience post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a stat equal to or higher than our US military veterans. And when we look at the economic impact to society, we find that the cost to taxpayers is approximately $300,000 for every young person who ages out of care. Now, though, let's take a few moments to look beyond the statistics, to hear a personal story from a young woman who has been there. Here's Hannah's story.
My childhood started pretty rough. I was born and then, unfortunately, I was left in the hospital by my mother. Childhood was tough. My dad's form of discipline was very physical. And then, unfortunately, the sexual abuse started when I was about 6 years old. We went to our first foster home the next day, where unfortunately the same things happened for a while. It was our first home where things were good, you know, like we felt like we were there. We felt like we were part of something until it was just too tough for her, you know, the fighting between us and her daughter, and it was just a lot. I was not prepared. We had independent living, of course, the classes, but like, they teach you how to write a check and make macaroni. It's not realistic. Like, it's not, that did nothing for me as an adult, nothing, because nobody takes checks anymore, and macaroni is probably the simplest thing you can cook. I had the same clothes that I had since I was like 15, 16, no plan to finish high school, no plans at all, honestly. So they bought me a plane ticket the day, like 2 days before I aged out, and I flew to Florida, and I lived there for 2 weeks. I moved back, and I got my own apartment, and things started to get scary from that point because I had no idea what I was doing as an adult. I literally had a pillow and a blanket. The gas station clerk is telling me, "Baby, you don't want to be here once we leave. Like, it's dangerous. You don't want to be here." And so I'm panicking. And so I call Mandy, and she's like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna call the nearest police, and they're gonna come get you. And then they're gonna bring you to this hotel, which my parents have paid for." And I stayed there at the hotel until her parents came get me. They drove 8 hours. These people who have never met me before in their life to come get me to make sure I was safe. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I have always loved the beauty industry. Then I had to name the business, and I said, well, it's lashes, and I have dreamed of nothing more than to be successful. So Lash Dreams was the name. I trademarked my name. I've never been more proud of anything in my entire life. It is the pinkest thing you've ever seen in your entire life. I essentially created that space as what I wanted my bedroom to look like as a child or as a young adult. It's a piece of heaven for me. I look back on like what I thought my life would be, and I thought I would be in jail or dead. And so to look at my life now and look at my success, but the very, very rocky road it took me to get here, I am so proud. I'm so grateful for the life that I live. But it would have never been like this without Mandy and Connie. Connie's like my mom. She's like my biggest supporter, my biggest fan. She has made sure, like, even when I first moved in, she let me be a kid. She let me find myself. I was in several different adoptive placements. I hadn't been through the therapy that I needed to accept those circumstances. I never had an accurate description of what a parent is supposed to look like, or even a small sliver of that. And so in my head, it's like, okay, I don't have parents. You're not going to tell me what to do. I don't want you to be my mom. Why would you be my mom? Like, my own mom doesn't even want me. Why on earth would I let you do that? I feel like at that point, if I had therapy, it would have been so much better. Like, I just wouldn't let myself be loved. If I was adopted, my life would have been 10 times better, 10 times easier. If I had someone as a parent, as someone to guide me, my life would have been so much different in such a positive way. Because if I didn't have Mandy or Connie, I would still be stuck. I would still be trying to figure it out. And I had no idea how to figure it out. The logic in aging out makes no sense. Like, and that's coming from someone who's been there.
Yeah, seeing lots of reactions in the chat. It is truly such a powerful video. Who and story. I'm so grateful to Hannah that she lets us share her story to help educate people about permanency. Just devastating. We've watched this video so many times and it still gets me. It's devastating to just think about her being on basically the eve of her 18th birthday and someone handing her a plane ticket and saying, yeah, go live with your mom, who essentially she didn't have a relationship with at that point, or being left with only a pillow and a blanket. We don't want that for any human ever. So when I watch that video, I think, how do we prevent other youth from experiencing these things, from these outcomes that Hannah had? And some of the pieces of that, I think, are early permanency preparation. So not waiting until someone's 17 and a half or 16 to be talking about their future. Preparation that explores their fears and misconceptions. Hannah talks about how therapy would have helped her, or other professionals like Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters who are trained to process through those fears and misconceptions. And then a big one is people. People like Mandy and Connie made the difference in Hannah's life and helped her to see that her future could be different than she thought it was going to be. And these are all things that we're going to talk about today. We're so excited. So let's get started. This presentation is not an overview of the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program. We do believe that the information we're going to share today is applicable to youth across the board. We know there are so many different facets of adoption and permanency, so it's possible that all of you participating today might have experience in a wide variety of populations within the field, with children and youth of different ages, different permanency plans, and different amounts of time that they've spent in care. So before we dive into our permanency preparation conversation, we did think it was important to share some information about the youth served by Wendy's Wonderful Kids, because these are the youth who've informed our practice, sometimes from our own experience working directly with them as recruiters or caseworkers, but also from supporting Wendy's Wonderful Kids professionals from across the US, Canada, Puerto Rico, and learning from their experiences as well. So just a little about Wendy's Wonderful Kids. The Wendy's Wonderful Kids focused population includes children and youth ages 9 and older, or younger if they're part of a sibling group or have special need. And we include youth who say they're opposed to adoption and those in long-term or extended foster care. Our goal is really to serve any child or young person that does not have an identified permanency resource. So as you can see on the slide, today there are over 6,100 children and young people on Wendy's Wonderful Kids caseloads. Their average age is 14, so we work with a lot of teenagers. 78% are part of a sibling group, 71% have at least one special need. When we look at what they've been through prior to coming into Wendy's Wonderful Kids, we find that these children have been in care an average of a little over 3 years and an average of almost 6 placements. And we want to keep in mind that these are averages. So we've worked with youth who've been in 1 or 2 placements, and we've worked with youth like Hannah who have been in over 30 placements during their time in care. And just imagine the instability that that much movement creates. The vast majority, 86%, had minimal or no permanency recruitment efforts prior to Wendy's Wonderful Kids. And sadly, over 1 in 5 have experienced a dissolved or disrupted adoption prior to joining the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program. Additionally, 3/4 of the youth served by our program have experienced the termination of their parents' parental rights. So our focus is usually for youth where it's been determined that returning home is not an option. However, we do add the caveat that the information we're going to share today can be really helpful well before that time. Even when a youth returns home, they are not returning to the same situation that they came from. Their parents' circumstances have certainly changed. Other siblings may or may not be in the home, and family expectations and rules may have changed. So it's important to prepare them for those types of changes. But generally, when we were creating this, we were thinking about youth who've been in care for years, experienced multiple placement changes, and it's been determined that they can't return home to their parents. When we set out to tailor permanency preparation to the unique needs of each youth, first we need to really understand who are these people? Who are these youth? What have they been through? And how have those factors affected not just their past relationships, but their ability to thrive in current relationships and new relationships? We know from research and experience that people heal in relationships, but for many of the youth we serve, loss of relationships is the common thread. After being in care for multiple years and multiple placement changes, it's all too common for youth to become disconnected to their family, community, and culture. And every time they change placements and every time their caseworker turns over, the ties that they do have just further are at risk of unraveling. Systems and procedures have certainly changed in the past several years, and there's a lot more effort made to maintain connections with family for youth on the front end of care. But unfortunately, that's not always the case for youth who've been waiting, particularly after termination of parental rights. When I was a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter, I was struck by how many of the youth I worked with where their whole child welfare team was their caseworker and an attorney. And that's 2 people. We've all heard the phrase, it takes a village, and 2 people just cannot be the village for youth. Really, none of us can have just a village of 2 people. The team is trying to meet the day-to-day needs of the child, but they might not even understand fully the needs of the youth if they haven't been able to form a strong relationship with them over time and have time to stay informed and look for new information. When we dig deeper, the reality is that most of our youth have a village, but they've not been called on. So today we're going to talk about ways that we can actively work to build a village around each youth and how that village can help prepare them for permanency. We'll also explore how what looks like resistance to permanency often results from a lack of understanding and fear, and how we can work through that. Because there aren't enough foster homes for the current needs, it's common for our youth to end up in residential treatment centers or group homes, even when they don't meet the criteria to be there. And as you can imagine, those settings are not ideal for connection. And in some places, we've seen connection or relationships being used as a so-called privilege that has to be earned by the youth. So for example, we've been told by Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters or caseworkers even that they've been told they can't visit a youth or even have a phone call with them because the youth isn't on the right level in whatever behavior system this facility is using. But we should be working with youth for permanency where they are now. They don't need to be better or stop their behaviors or be perfect. Youth don't need to change in order to deserve connections or permanency because youth heal in families. I once worked with a teen girl who had been in a residential treatment center for over a year. When I first met her, I went out and I was asking her, who are your friends here? Thinking I'm going to get to know her a little bit and learn about who her connections are. And she said, oh, we're not allowed to have friends. And I thought, well, that's very strange. So I went to the clinical therapist there and she confirmed, no, we don't allow the children to have friends with each other. We don't allow them to form strong relationships with staff. We just are very strong about boundaries. So she'd been discouraged from connecting with other people. Shortly thereafter, she was matched with a family through photo listing. And a few weeks in, they pulled the plug because they said, she's not bonding with us. And we could talk all day about how it's the family, the parents' responsibility to bond with the youth. But regardless of that, just imagine this teen girl. She was abused by her mother, abandoned by her father. She spent over a year in a residential treatment facility where she's been actively discouraged from connecting with other people and forming relationships. But then magically, when she's put into a home and has known a family for a few months and been in their home for a few weeks, she's supposed to just magically have the skills to form new relationships and sustain them. And ultimately, it's just unrealistic to expect that youth will seamlessly move into what we would consider typical family life after these kinds of atypical experiences. So Danielle, now that we've talked a little bit about the youth and their specific needs, will you share some more information about what we mean when we talk about permanency?
Yes, thank you, Beth. Before we really dive into what permanency is and means, Beth and I really want to know, what does permanency mean and look like to you? What does it mean to you? So in the chat, share a word or two that comes to your mind when you think of permanency and what it means. I see safety and support and stability, a home, a forever family, a future. They're really flying in. Acceptance, unconditional
Yes,
love.
unconditional love. I've seen that a few times.
I see connection.
LOVE in all caps with exclamation points.
I saw someone put grounded, like a place to be
Oh, I
grounded. I
love
like
that.
that a lot. Yeah, I like that a lot. Trust. Yes, you are all spot on. They're still coming in, but you guys are all spot on. Permanency is a lifelong sense of belonging in a committed family, and it involves all the things you all said in the chat. It involves stable and supportive relationships, emotional security, enduring connections that last into adulthood. And in the child welfare field, it's also a legal sense of security. But permanency is a process, not one singular event. Permanency preparation should begin early in a youth involvement with the system, rather than waiting until a match is imminent. Beginning this work at the point of termination of parental rights, we would say, is too late. Instead, effective practice requires us looking at concurrent planning throughout the case, throughout the life of the case. For example, when the goal is reunification and a youth is in a foster placement, efforts should simultaneously include exploring kinship placement options in case reunification is not possible. But similarly, when a youth is already in a kinship placement, we should be having ongoing discussions to address long-term permanency options and assess the caregiver's willingness to provide a permanent home if reunification cannot occur. And if the case is moving forward towards termination of parental rights, professionals should not wait for that process to conclude before having discussions and identifying and pursuing options for the youth and what that could look like. It's also really important to recognize that preparing for permanency is an ongoing process that should happen and occur throughout the youth's involvement in the system. And this process must be collaborative and centered on the youth. It should be done with them and not to them. Youth should be actively engaged from the very beginning, as their voice and perspectives and preferences are essential to achieving successful and meaningful permanency outcomes. You might be thinking, why does early preparation matter? Early preparation is essential, regardless of the young person's case plan goal, whether that's reunification or adoption or legal guardianship or another permanency option. Initiating permanency conversations early in the process helps ensure that planning is thoughtful and proactive and responsive to the youth and their specific needs. It also supports stronger youth voice and engagement by involving the young people in meaningful decisions about their future from the very beginning. It also contributes to better permanency outcomes by reducing delays and increasing the likelihood of identifying stable, lasting connections for the youth. Ultimately, though, early preparation provides and promotes improved long-term well-being for the youth by helping them establish supportive relationships and a sense of security that are critical for their success into adulthood. As child welfare and adoption professionals, we must always work to ensure that no youth leaves foster care without a real opportunity to achieve legal permanency. Again, whether that's through reunification with their birth family, guardianship with a relative or non-relative kin, adoption, or tribal customary adoption. Additionally, some states also recognize soul family, which establishes a connection between a youth and at least one caring adult. But unlike some other permanency options, soul family allows young people to make these new connections without severing legal ties with their birth family. For more information on this permanency option, we really encourage you to go to Annie E. Casey Foundation's website to learn more. But the most important thing to remember is that legal permanency occurs when a court issues a final adoption decree, a guardianship order, an order for reinstatement of parental rights, or reunification. Beth, will you now talk to us about youth engagement in the permanency process?
Yes, absolutely. So let's talk about application. What does this look like in terms of your work with youth? So how many of you have ever experienced sitting at a dining room table with a youth you're working with, and they are just giving you one-word answers, if any, to the questions that you're asking? Anyone experience? Okay, Danielle says yes. Okay. Oh yeah. Yep. Definitely. Yes. Me too. Same. I was telling Danielle a story about when I started as a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter, and I was going to meet a youth I was adding to my caseload. He was a teen boy. I had read his file. I had a list of questions I was going to ask him, all written down on a nice piece of paper. I got to his foster home early before he got off the bus. So just chatting with his foster mom at the dining room table. And we were at one end of the table and the door was very close to us. So he came in from school. He said hello. She introduced me and said, "Why don't you sit down?" Now, do we think he sat down right next to me and engaged in a conversation? No, he did not. He walked as far away from me as he possibly could. And I was telling Danielle, in my memory, the table is one of those that's like in a castle where you're half a mile away from the person on the other side. And that's where he was sitting and did not look up, did not make eye contact with me. And I remember thinking, okay, these questions are not going to be answered today. Wad that up and toss it over your shoulder. So some of us, and it looks like I'm not alone in this, have learned the hard way that maybe sitting at a table rapid firing questions at teenagers especially is maybe not the way to get them to open up. So, we might be their fifth caseworker, and maybe they don't want to open up to somebody who's just going to leave them again. So we encourage folks to learn about what interests the youth. Maybe they love soccer and you can go kick a ball around for 30 minutes while you get to know them a little bit. So that inspired us to put together, to compile this list of do's and don'ts for helpful permanency conversations when you're just starting out, maybe working with a young person and trying to have conversations about permanency with them. The first do is practice ahead of time. And you might feel silly doing this, but think about what questions you want to ask. Practice asking them and expect some resistance or quiet. This might be the first time that the youth has thought about this or anybody has really asked them about their future in this way. We want to ask future-oriented questions. So who would you like to spend the holidays with when you're an adult? Who would you want to walk you down the aisle if you got married? If you want a big trip and you could go anywhere in the world and take one person with you, where would you go and who would you take? We want to keep an open mind and make sure that we're exploring all permanency options. There are absolutely situations where guardianship makes more sense than adoption for a particular youth. And we've also seen instances where a young person has lingered in care for years after termination of parental rights. And when the team reaches out to their biological parent, they find that their circumstances have changed drastically. And they're actually able to go do a reinstatement of the parental rights. And we certainly never want to make promises to a youth about that type of an outcome, but we can help them understand that there's more than one path to permanency and that we are going to explore every single one of them. We want to give youth the space they need to ask questions or talk about their concerns. We don't have to fill all the space with conversation, which is easier said than done for some of us who are talkers. But sometimes youth are hesitating or waiting for the right moment to ask questions. But if we don't be quiet for a minute and give them the space to do that, then they don't have the opportunity. We also want to create space for change. Too often we hear that a young person's goal changed to APLA because the caseworker asked them one time, do you want to be adopted? And they said no. But this is not a one-time conversation. Youth might not feel emotionally safe to open themselves up to considering permanency the first few times a conversation comes up, really. But that doesn't mean that they'd never be open to it, especially if we find the right family. So I'm thinking about a Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter I worked with. She was working with a 17-year-old girl, we'll call her Jess, and she was really opposed to permanency. Month after month, the recruiter would bring it up, and she just wasn't interested, and she was adamant that she was going to age out and be on her own. But after some time, her recruiter found the family who had adopted the youth's biological sister in a different state. And she got connected with them. Eventually, she went to their house for a week-long visit. And when she came back, she told her recruiter, I think I've changed my mind. And to make a long story short, Jess was ultimately adopted by the family who had adopted her sister. And she realized that she could still transition into adulthood, but she could do it with the support of a family, including her sister. But the fact that her recruiter had kept that conversation alive and allowed her to, where they had a relationship where she knew she was allowed to change her mind and she had someone she could talk to about it, really made a difference. Even after a year of saying no thank you, she knew she could come back and tell her recruiter that she'd changed her mind. So those are our do's. On the other hand, we have some don'ts. Don't use jargon or emotionally charged language like permanency in early conversations with the youth. Adoption can be a really emotionally charged word, especially for those youth who've experienced a disrupted or dissolved adoption. We want to use their language and meet them where they are. And we can keep in mind that it can be helpful to introduce the term permanency along with a definition of it, because it's common that other people in their lives are going to use the word permanency, but we want to make sure that they know what it means before we start just throwing that word around. So as Danielle said, it is a family relationship and a bond that's intended to last a lifetime. Adolescent brains are fun. They're wired to want independence and autonomy, but please don't let that desire convince you that youth don't need or want a family. Remember how quickly Jess's mind changed once the right family was identified. Even if a young person's goal has changed to APLA, independent living on paper, we should still be talking to them about permanency options and the importance of connecting with others. And lastly, just don't give up. If you don't honestly believe that your youth deserves or can achieve permanency, that's going to show up in your work and they are going to pick up on it. On the other hand, if you wholeheartedly believe that permanency is possible for all youth, your positive energy and hopefulness can be contagious to the youth and to others on their team as well. On the journey to connecting the youth with meaningful lifelong relationships, it can be easy to overlook the impact of your relationship with the youth. But building a solid relationship with youth is so important to permanency preparation. I like to think about the professional's relationship with the youth as a foundation on which all the other permanency preparation work sits. And so if that foundation is not strong, it's likely that these other parts of permanency preparation that you're doing also won't hold up over time. So trust and a sense of safety are really what makes meaningful relationships possible. Without those, it's tough to move forward in a lasting way. In a rigorous 5-year evaluation of the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program, they found that older youth who were initially opposed to adoption were more likely to consider it after working with the Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter, and they cited openness and honesty as some of the cornerstones of those relationships. And we're not the only ones who found that that's important. In their study, Transformational Relationships for Youth Success, the Center for the Study of Social Policy examined how relationships influence young people's mindsets and shape their decision making. And I want to share a quote from that study with you. It was a surprise to find that someone thought they matter, the youth. It was a bigger surprise when this turned out to be more than just words, when a worker showed up even when the youth did not want to see them, showed up again and again, kept showing up even after the young person had done something wrong, showed up when not expected, to celebrate even a small accomplishment or to help during a crisis, and challenged the youth about negative behaviors when it might be easier to say nothing. All of these experiences differed from what the youth had come to take for granted, that they didn't matter and that anyone allowed to become important would soon leave. Eventually, the young people began to matter more to themselves. And the quote continues on, as they mattered more to themselves, youth saw that things could be different. When you don't matter enough to yourself or others, it's hard to imagine that what you do or don't do matters. These young people described how, as they started to matter more, they began to reflect on their lives in a way that they'd not been able to do earlier. End quote. They began to reflect on their lives in a way they had not been able to do earlier. I think that's so powerful. Not just that they did reflect on their lives in a way they hadn't before, but that they were able to reflect on their lives in a way they had not even been able to do before. So when I think about that in relation to opposition to adoption, we're not talking about changing youth's minds for them, but creating a relationship that will transform their ability to even consider alternatives to their current situation. That is so powerful. So let's take a minute and reflect on a meaningful relationship, either in our own lives or the life of a young person you've worked with, and think about what about that relationship gave it the power to make an impact. And if you want to share in the chat, please share what specific qualities about that relationship helped it become influential. Trust, past connections maintained, yes.
Consistency.
Consistent, safe and affirming, so important, yes.
Keeping your word.
Mm-hmm.
Huge.
Love, communication, respect, so important.
Oh, allowing them
You
to
always,
feel heard. Sorry.
oh, I love that one. No, go ahead. Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. We love hearing from you. And yeah, I mean, I was thinking about in Hannah's situation with Mandy. Talk about an influential relationship where she was able to call Mandy, who was no longer her caseworker, and say, I need help. And she knew that Mandy would find a way to help her out, and then ultimately was able to help her find her people. There's no one size fits all approach to permanency preparation. Every child is unique in their identity and experiences, so our approach needs to be tailored to meet those needs. On this slide, you'll see common fears that youth have reported about permanency. Most youth waiting in care are worried that no one will want them, and the longer they wait without permanency, the more that's just reinforced in their minds. Often, resistance toward permanency comes down to fear, so it's important to take time to listen to the youth, normalize those fears, and help them work through their emotions. And the foundation has created a document, 7 Common Fears Children in Foster Care Have About Permanency, and it goes through how to address them, and this will be sent to you in the recap email after this webinar. It's important that anyone who's working with young people in foster care understands how trauma can shape development. For youth who've experienced trauma and loss, those experiences can influence how they view relationships and how safe it feels to trust others. When we think about adolescent brain development, it's helpful to remember that independence is a totally normal part of growing up, but it can really take on a whole different meaning for youth in foster care. For some, leaning into independence might feel safer than risking further disappointment. It's also important to consider each child's cognitive, developmental, and emotional abilities when planning your conversations and activities. A 9-year-old's understanding of adoption and grief and loss is likely going to be different than a 16-year-old's, but we also need to take into consideration that the 16-year-old's development may have been impacted by their experiences. So we want to make sure we're aware of any special need a youth has and take those into consideration. And remember that grief and loss can also affect executive functioning and a sense of identity. Looking at a young person's feelings, fears, and behaviors through a trauma responsive lens can help them make sense of their experiences and build hope for their future. This approach focuses on creating those trusting relationships, giving youth a voice, and making space for honest conversations so they feel more in control of their lives. Young people often know exactly who the adults in their lives are who are most important to them. So that's really valuable information that cannot be replaced by just looking in a case file. But they also aren't going to just give that information up to anybody. So I'm thinking about a teen girl named Kenya. We have a video of Kenya, and she was in care. She had this piece of paper, and it had a bunch of her family members' names and contact information on it. She had folded this paper up, they said like 20 times, and kept it under her mattress for over a year. Didn't even tell anybody that she had it. Then she started working with her Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiter. They built a very strong relationship. And Kenya realized, I think I can trust this person with this information. Pulls out this folded up pieces of paper, shared it with her recruiter. And ultimately, this led to her achieving legal permanency with her aunt, which is really amazing. And I just think that it shows how important, how youth hold on to information that they might not be sharing with us because they don't feel safe or ready to. And so it just goes back to that whole foundation of the relationship that has to be there to get at that information. So now that we've discussed engaging with youth, Danielle, would you like to talk about engaging with the adults in youth lives?
Yes, I would love to. Before we get into that a little bit, Beth and I really want to know, let's identify some of who those adults might be. We want to know what your guys' thoughts are. So who in a youth's life can support them throughout the permanency process? Share some ideas of who those people might be in the chat, if you wouldn't mind. I see teachers, coaches, bio parents, pastor,
CASA volunteers,
neighbor,
therapists,
mental health worker. Oh, I saw
extended
school janitor.
family.
Yeah, I just saw a school janitor and staff. So I love that creative thinking of people within the school as well. Yes. Former step parent, a coach.
I love that one, former step parent. Sometimes we'll come across professionals who say, well, they're not even really related to them, but they could have a very strong relationship.
Yeah, exactly. Extended family. Yes. Previous caregivers, siblings, family. Yes.
This group knows, Danielle. They
Yeah,
know
right?
who these folks are. Yeah,
They
perfect.
know. Thank you guys. You guys are spot on. So, how do we establish these meaningful relationships that help our youth truly support permanency with all the individuals you guys shared in the chat, right? And one of the first steps is for us as professionals to shift from a placement mindset to a more people-centered approach. Youth need more than just a place to live. They need a network of caring, committed adults. In other words, like Beth has said, they need a village, not just a singular placement. And too often, relationships are not prioritized, particularly when a young person expresses opposition to adoption. However, this is really precisely when relationships should be emphasized even more. We have already seen the powerful impact that a strong connection between a worker and a youth can have. We heard that with Kenya in the story Beth just shared in our first video with Hannah. When we expand these connections to include unpaid natural supports, so those other adults in the youth's life, the potential impact becomes even greater. These relationships can be the key factor that begins to shift a young person's perspective on permanency. But at the same time, we must also recognize that many youth have had limited exposure to healthy relationships. Their past family experiences may have been marked by dysfunction, instability, and trauma. And because of this, they often need intentional opportunities to learn how to navigate and maintain healthy relationships. Skills such as co-regulation, trust building, and experiencing predictability in a safe relationship are not always innate. They are learned through having experiences. And we also know that practice is essential for growth. However, if our youth have had limited connections and are not given the opportunities to practice in building and maintaining relationships, so it's really important that we remember that most people also don't marry the first person they ever date. I'm sure there are some exceptions, but in general, we don't marry the first person we ever date. And our early relationships may look very different from our permanent ones, but they are critical for development because through these experiences, individuals learn communication and boundaries and trust building and conflict resolution, skills that are essential for sustaining healthy connections. So youth deserve those same opportunities to learn and grow through connection. So, for example, if we have worked to identify maybe a youth's neighbor, their former connection as a potential supportive adult for them, we can help them by helping them nurture that relationship. Maybe they spend some more time together, they communicate, they hang out. If we help them nurture that, that gives them and that youth practice in a more typical relationship than maybe what they have experienced in their placement setting, whether that's a group home or residential center. And many of our youth as well need support in understanding what it truly means to be part of a family. And we kind of heard Hannah say that in the video as well, right? This includes not just the concept of a family, but what it also looks like in daily life, how people show up for one another, how they work through challenges when they come up, because we know they do, and how they provide consistency and care for each other. And as professionals, we must also always consider the impact of trauma and disrupted attachments, which can help which can hinder, not help, sorry, hinder our youth in forming and maintaining relationships and help that and make that harder and especially more challenging. And while our hope is that one of these meaningful relationships we help our youth nurture will grow into a permanency resource or legal permanency for them, every connection our youth have and they build has value for them. Even when a relationship does not become a permanent placement, it still plays such an important role. And these supportive adults can help prepare the youth for permanency by sharing insights, modeling healthy connection, and guiding future caregivers in how to best engage and support that young person. Ultimately, when we prioritize relationships and create opportunities for youth to have connection, we are not just working towards placement. We are helping the youth build a foundation, a village for lasting, meaningful relationships that will support them throughout their entire lives. But we also know that families may have been impacted by the child welfare system, do not always feel empowered, and they may find it difficult to trust professionals because of their past experiences. So it's essential that we develop respectful, genuine relationships with families to build trust. And here's some ways we can do that. We can prioritize open communication and collaboration, approaching families with empathy and involving them meaningfully in decisions. We can use a strength-based approach, recognizing and building on what families already bring to the table, asking them questions like, what do you think would help you reach your goals? That encourages creativity and shared problem solving. We can provide culturally responsive support that aligns with the family's cultural values and lived experiences. And we can advocate for systemic improvements by reducing barriers and promoting equitable, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive practices. And if reunification is a safe option, we should be exploring it and ensuring that families have the tools and resources needed for long-term success. And we should be planning ahead and connecting families to post-permanency resources they can utilize far beyond finalization in their time with us. Empowering families is about trust, respect, and consistent support, recognizing their strengths and addressing systemic challenges and always prioritizing what's best for the youth. A youth support network is made up of adults who may not be the youth's primary resource, but who are still committed to being that in that young person's life long term. We've talked about how important those relationships can be. So the next step is thinking about how we can intentionally build and strengthen that network. And the truth is, support can come from a lot of different places. It could be a teacher, a coach, a foster parent, a group home staff, a dentist, a biological family member, all the people you guys put in the chat. Those are all people who could be a part of the youth network and support them. And sometimes the people who seem like smaller connections end up being some of the most meaningful supports in that young person's life. And sometimes those connections even show up in unexpected ways. One of our Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters shared a story with us about a youth who had a relationship with their bus driver. The bus driver had been their bus driver for many years, so they had a relationship. And when she went to go talk to them, the bus driver kind of expressed and knew that they wouldn't be able to provide that placement or permanency option for the youth. But that connection still mattered to them. And in the end, long story short, the bus driver's son became the youth's placement and eventually adopted them, meaning the bus driver became his grandpa. So it's just such a good reminder that support can come from places we may not expect. One of the most important things that we can do is to make sure the youth have a voice in identifying the people in their support networks. When youth get to help choose who those people are, they are usually more invested in those relationships and more willing to engage with you in the process as well. And as we work with the youth and the adults around them, one question we should always keep asking is, what role does this person play in the youth's life? Not every person is going to serve the same purpose, and that's okay. One person may end up being that permanent placement for them, provide them permanency, but someone else may be the person the youth calls when they need advice, when they want to go grab a meal, they need encouragement, or want to be included maybe in family traditions. And as more people become a part of the network, they may help the youth build a sense of connection and belonging and hope for the future, which is what we want. It's also important to help these network members understand how they can also then support the youth. A lot of people want to help, but they may not know what is actually needed. And that's where you all can help, right? Different people bring different strengths, and no one person has to meet every need. And in fact, we don't want that. Our youth do best when they have a group of supportive adults around them who can then collectively together offer guidance and encouragement and practical support. These relationships as well also help youth work through permanency challenges and build important life skills. Young people who have spent a long time in care may not have had many chances to practice independence and interdependence, or even healthy relationships, like we've said. So these trusted adults can help them build those skills simply by showing up consistently and staying connected to them over time. And support networks don't just only benefit the youth. They also help support the caregiver, whoever's caring for the youth as well. That support can look in a lot of different ways as well, right? It can be maybe they provide respite or transportation or mentorship to the youth and that caregiver, or even emotional support, or even just checking in regularly with the youth. Ongoing connection is really what helps strengthen relationships and create that stability for the youth. I've worked with a lot of teens, and one of the teens I've worked with, they stay connected to their former foster parent even after they left her home. They would stop by for dinner. They were in the area, grab some food. They liked the foster mom's cooking a lot, and occasionally just stop by for a chat, or one time ask for some gas money. And that foster parent stayed in their lives and continued to support them even after they exited care and became adults. That relationship, to some people, may have not looked like a permanency on paper, and it wasn't permanency on paper, but it absolutely gave those youth a sense of connection, care, and belonging. She continued to be a part of their network. And that's really such an important point and aspect. Supportive relationships can't be conditional as well on a youth's behavior. Lasting connections require commitment and consistency and a willingness to stay engaged even through those hard moments, not just the easy ones. But at the end of the day, strong support networks lead to stronger outcomes for our youth. Everyone involved has a role to play in helping connect the youth to caring adults and build a lasting circle of support, one that gives that stability and belonging to the youth. Beth talked with us about using a trauma-informed lens with the youth, but we also need to look at that for the adults as well, those connections. We want to do this with individuals within their network. We can help support these adults and these families by first acknowledging the trauma they may have experienced and recognizing how deeply their past challenges may have affected them. It's important that we validate their feelings, whether that's anger or grief or frustration, as understandable reactions to their circumstances. And this kind of validation is often the first step in building trust, and being transparent in our communication and following through consistently helps rebuild confidence in systems that may have let them down before, even if you weren't the one to directly do it. Empowerment is also key to healing. Whenever possible, we support youth and families in making their own choices and having control in the process. And this includes involving families in decisions about the youth's care and helping them set their own goals for stability and recovery, which can help them restore a sense of autonomy that trauma often takes away from them. We can also help families by connecting them to supportive services, both for immediate needs like housing help or legal help, and for long-term needs like trauma counseling or support groups. Beth, can you help us walk through a scenario to apply some of the things that you and I have discussed today?
Yes, let's do it. We're going to read through this scenario and then we'll walk through some reflection questions together. So our scenario today is Kai. Kai is a 16-year-old honor student who plays on his high school soccer team and loves cars. He says he's not interested in adoption. The first time you mention it, he says, I just want to age out, and changes the subject. But through your deep dive into his case file and conversation with Kai's caseworker, you find out that he has a strong relationship with his paternal grandmother, Kara. Kara told the caseworker that she cannot take care of Kai because of her age and medical conditions, and she has discouraged Kai from being adopted because she does not want to lose her relationship with him. So these are some reflection questions, not just to use with this scenario, but anytime you're setting out to do permanency preparation with work with a youth, you're getting to know. So Danielle, I'll ask you the first question. What developmental, cognitive, or emotional needs should we be considering when we're planning permanency preparation activities or conversations with Kai?
Yeah. Kai is, when I think about him, he's a smart teen. We heard that he was in some honors classes, so he has some care about school and about his education. But I also know that he has expressed some concerns about just wanting to age out. So he's kind of thinking from that emotional standpoint, which we see with a lot of our teens. So I want to keep that in my mind, that I might need to talk through to him what permanency is, means, all of those things. I also know he has a strong relationship with his grandma, so I'd want to take that into consideration and talk through with him about that relationship and all of those things, maybe the some misconceptions that both him and grandma have. So I'd want to keep that in my mind, that I'd want to kind of work with him and grandma in the future about those things, to kind of address them and maybe help relieve some of his fears about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Beth, what permanency preparation efforts could you use or would you use with Kai in this situation?
Yeah, I think the main thing would be, my goal would be to get him thinking about the future, because we know that teenagers are often just in the moment that they're in, thinking about that moment. It's the most important and only moment that exists. So we want to get him thinking about the future, and we mean long term for the future. So helping him think about ways we rely on our families throughout our lives. I love sharing youth voices videos with young people. So the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption has a YouTube page. If you search DTFA, you'll find a page. We have all kinds of different perspectives on video, but there's a group of youth voices videos, and these are videos just like Hannah's, where they are from the perspective of young people. Some of them aged out and are talking about how important permanency would have been to them, how it would have changed their lives. Some of them did experience legal permanency, and they're talking about how impactful it has been for them. And I find that sometimes teenagers listen to each other a little bit better than they do those of us who are older. And so I think sharing those videos from people who've been in very similar situations can be really helpful. And then I also love to share with the teens like stories about my own life and how I've relied on family for so many years. I love to tell about, I had my son when I was 36 years old, which I point out is twice 18. So I'd already been 18 twice by that point. And I was living really far away from my family. And my husband and I picked up and we moved back to my hometown so that we would be closer to our village of support as we were raising our son. And so just helping him think with real examples about the ways that we rely on people throughout our lives, I think would be my number one goal.
No, such a good point.
Thanks. Well, what other adults can help prepare Kai for permanency, and how would you engage them, Danielle?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, grandma seems like kind of the key a little bit at this point from what we know about Kai. So I'd really want to work with grandma to help her get an understanding of permanency and what it does and does not mean, that it doesn't have to mean disconnection, because hopefully she might be able to help Kai understand and process this and be supportive in that. She may be able to provide information on other adults he's had strong relationships with and kind of bring those people in. So I'd really want to focus in on that key relationship. Obviously, I'd want to look at he's involved in soccer and loves soccer and cars, but I would want to look at involving that soccer coach or other people of the team. Are there friends' parents that go there? Are there other assistant coaches and all of those things that I could link with? And then I think the school as well, his teachers, there's any groups he's involved in at school, other staff members, things like that. I'd want to bring them in to that network of people to help support him throughout the process.
Absolutely. And we could go on, right? This is a very short scenario, and we're finding so many different things to consider and people. And so just imagining when it's a real teen, how much more there is even for folks to explore. So just sum up, like Danielle said, Kai is a bright teen. He can think things through, especially if he feels safe and trusts the adults that he's talking to. But like most teens, his decisions are shaped by emotion a lot of the time. So starting the conversation from an emotional lens and then helping gently guide him toward thinking about his future in a more logical way can be really helpful. It also sounds like his grandmother's belief that adoption means losing their relationship might be influencing how Kai sees things. So it'll be important to reassure both of them that ideally their connection can continue, and ideally open the door to think about other trusted people in their lives who could be a part of Kai's permanency plan. Keeping that conversation hopeful and using youth voices examples and involving other supportive adults can hopefully help Kai feel safer exploring what permanency could look like for him. Danielle, can you share some other practices that center youth and family voice?
Yes. So one of the first things I'm going to mention is that you can adopt successful programs like Wendy's Wonderful Kids, which focuses on finding permanent families through the child-focused recruitment model. It emphasizes building a genuine relationship with the youth to help them understand their fears and desires and their support networks. And by engaging people already in the youth's life, like teachers, coaches, all the people we've kind of mentioned today, and educating them about permanency, this approach expands recruitment efforts and helps identify both potential adoptive families and lasting support systems. And because it builds on existing relationships, this model leverages trust and familiarity, making the process more comfortable for the youth and often leading to more stable placements. Youth-centered permanency roundtables are another great resource to use if they're available to you in your jurisdiction. With a trained facilitator, youth lead conversations to brainstorm permanency options and identify goals for their future. Family team decision-making meetings ensure family, including parents and children, any relatives or support connections, are included in meetings and invites them to be at the table in discussions of what is happening to their family. Adoption competent therapists are professionals who have been trained to understand the complexities of adoptive, foster, and kinship care to then be able to address trauma, loss and grief, and identity formation. And the Center for Adoption Support and Education provides a national directory of adoption competent professionals. So you can go on their website, type in your state or your area, and a list of those individuals will then pop up for you to be able to reach out to and use. So I think that's a great resource. Beth and I have also created a resource called Voices Matter, Practical Tips for Discussing Permanency with Youth, which is a guide to use as you plan conversations with youth around permanency and their future. And that resource will also be shared in the recap email you receive at the end of the webinar. So next, we are going to hear another story. This story is about Sean and how he developed a relationship with his now adoptive family.
I'm a librarian. His class came in to use the library, and I was helping them find books in their interest. And I found him a book, and he took it with him.
I like sounds of cars. I like to look at the body style, what exterior colors it comes in, or interior color. It's my passion. I wanted to go see her, talk with her.
He was born crack addicted from his birth mother, and his first foster mom had him at a couple days old, and then she decided to adopt him, but she became ill, and so she couldn't take care of him any longer.
I was put in residential facilities.
I remember in the fall of, it would have been Sean's 7th grade year, she would talk about this young man she met. And then I went to the Christmas party, and one of Sean's teachers came up to me and says, you better watch out, there's a young man in your wife's life. He loves her. I'd been for a while thinking about, well, maybe we should consider adopting, because at this point, you know, our 4 children were grown.
And he said, bring him home.
Just seeing a difference between what Sean was like in his group home prior to this to then when he would be here and I would see him here, it's night and day. He has the structure, he has the love and support, the consistency. They really took their time to get to know him and how to manage behaviors and how to support him the best ways possible.
Oh my goodness, she helped us every step of the way. She would explain things to me and help us with all the paperwork, and we would put the pieces together.
I feel like Dora and Dave very care about me. I feel safe here.
He's just joyful and, you know, loving, that simplistic love that, you know, that we wish we all had. He has that. And he just wants to do everything that every typical kid does. As soon as he came to live here, he joined track in 8th grade.
Cross country is a very good sport, a good team. It's a good bond that we have. I like to be fast.
When we went to the banquet for cross country, his picture came up on the monitor and everyone cheered. It was so cute to see that he's finding his niche.
I can't see his future without cars in it.
And he probably will work at a dealership. It would be a sad thing to not give someone a chance, you know, at life. And if you don't take that teen and they age out of the system, that's going to be sad for them. They're not going to have that chance to learn what's the right thing to do and to be loved by a family.
Oh, these videos always get me. But I think the
Someone
biggest
said
thing,
the onions are ripe in here, Danielle.
seriously, Beth and I have seen many of these videos. I was still crying. I think they're so impactful. But I think the biggest statement that really hits home among many in that video was, I feel safe here. Sean saying, like, I feel safe here. Oh, that's so powerful. Sean found a meaningful connection, right? Through going to the library, his love of cars, got to know her, got to know Laura, and Laura and Dave developed a relationship with him and became a part of his network, part of his support group, got to know him, and then they became his adoptive family. And I just think that's so powerful and such a great story that we wanted to share with you all. So some key takeaways, we're almost to the end. Some key takeaways from today. We want you to start early and prepare with the youth. With the youth is so critical. It's important to tailor preparation to each youth's, there we go, needs and experiences, and to make sure you're actively involving the youth support network as well. And remember that permanency preparation is holistic. It's not a single task or tool. We need to be doing it long-term with the youth over time during their involvement with the system. But the greatest thing is that this is not a new tool or assessment that we're talking with you about today. It already builds on practices and things you are already doing in your work, approaching everyday interactions with youth and families through a more permanency-focused lens. All right, Beth, I think we have time for maybe one or two questions that we've kind of had come in today. So if you're cool with it, I'm going to ask you the first question.
Oh, good.
Um, Good, you get to be first.
Yeah,
Um,
fire away.
okay, good. Here's one of the questions. They're asking, how do we help youth who have had a lack of trust or lots of losses with adults? How do we help them build relationships?
Oh, that's a great question. I think really first normalizing that if they've had a lot of loss and past, difficulty in relationships, then that's really normal. It's normal that they're going to struggle to build relationships. So really focusing on connecting with them, building that relationship before, asking my list of questions and all of those things is really important. Focusing on the small things that you can do to show that you are someone who cares about them. So a small example is like if your first meeting they say they love peanut butter M&Ms, then the next meeting maybe you just bring a bag of peanut butter M&Ms. It costs a couple bucks and you built a lot of trust just in that little moment of you were heard, you were seen, and I'm going to keep showing up over time. So being consistent, showing up over time, and normalizing that trust is going to be something that takes time to build. I was thinking about a story from when I was a Wendy's Wonderful Kids supervisor, and a recruiter added a teen boy to her caseload. And everybody says, well, he doesn't really talk to anybody except his GAL. So she went and met with the GAL, and he said, yeah, we're really close now, but he didn't talk to me for the first year that I worked with him. So the recruiter is kind of bracing herself, like, I'm going in to meet with this youth. First visit, unsurprisingly, he didn't say anything to her. Second visit, still didn't say anything. She came back, she's in tears. We tried to remind her, this is going to take some time. Third visit, he says, I want to go to Chipotle. And it was like a celebration because he finally said something, and we celebrated that as if the world had changed, because it kind of did. There was a little bit of movement in that relationship, and it was starting to build over time. So just showing up, keeping it simple, understanding that it's normal that they might not feel super energized about building relationships, and it's going to take some time.
Yeah, I love how you sell it. Like the thing that you were talking about, I was thinking about celebrating those small wins too.
Yes,
Like that,
absolutely.
like him wanting to go to Chipotle. Like that's a small win. We need to think about those things too.
Yes, absolutely. Do you think we have time for one more question, Danielle?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I'll ask
I
you
can be
one.
quick with it. Okay.
Let's see. How can kinship caregivers support permanency when they don't know where to start?
Yeah. I would really encourage the adults or those people within the youth network to start small, kind of like what you said a little bit. Build a connection and a relationship with the youth, spend time with them, be consistent, help them build that circle of support too. Maybe that individual knows other people to kind of bring in and encourage other adults to know who know the youth to be a part of that circle, to talk to the youth about their future plans and what that might look like, ask them about who else is in their lives as well, help them make those meaningful connections and be supportive of that, and just be in general a person they can rely on and go to for questions, support, guidance during the permanency process, and be that person, just be that consistency for them.
Right. Sometimes the big things are lots of little small things that add up
Yeah.
over time.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that. Okay, well, I know we want to give folks a lot of time to fill out their survey.
Yes, so we're going to leave you a little early, but just a couple reminders, so don't hang up yet. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Just a reminder of a couple of things. Please utilize our website, the davethomasfoundation.org, and the foundation's YouTube page for helpful resources and videos like we've talked about today. Please remember to complete the survey. That will pop up momentarily after we end the webinar. You make sure you do that if you want to receive a certificate of attendance or the CE certificate for that 1 hour for today's webinar. So please complete that before exiting your browser. And one last thing, during the month of July, the foundation is partnering with the Harris Poll to survey child welfare professionals across the United States about best practices and any perceived barriers to achieving legal permanency for youth that are lingering in foster care. So during the week of July 6th, keep an eye out for an email from the foundation with more information about the survey. Then shortly thereafter, you should receive the survey link in an email from the Harris Poll. We hope you take a few minutes to participate in this important research. All responses are anonymous, and your feedback will inform the Foundation's campaigns to raise awareness about the importance of permanency for every child and the creation of resources to support child welfare professionals like you in this life-changing work. So thank you in advance for your valued insights. And again, we really appreciate you being here today. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.